Chicos, ¿cómo estáis? Reunión de la FED, primera del año. Bienvenidos. Vamos a verla en directo. Tenemos ya aquí para tomar la libretita notas. Vamos a coger un boli, chicos. Vamos a ver si empieza a hablar el señor Powell. Bueno, 25 puntos básicos en línea de lo previsto. Vamos a ver las razones que da a partir de ahora. Y bueno, a ver qué comenta Powell. Vamos a compartir las redes. Un momentito. Vamos a ver. Un segundín. Bueno, mientras por ahí, ¿quién estáis? Voy a ver que estamos compartiendo en directo. Vale. Bueno, pues nada, lo dejo ahí en Twitter por si alguien le quiere dar retweet, le quiere dar like, quiere compartir el contenido. Ahí estamos tuiteando. Hombre, JM, ¿qué tal? Te veo a tope. Dice, sí, bueno, estamos... La verdad que estamos como podemos. Y esperar que no os estoy poniendo la pantalla, disculpar, Disculpar que no, claro, que no estáis viendo nada. Bueno, a ver cómo se comportan los bonos, ¿no? Fijaros, los bonos de 10 menos 2 años los seguimos teniendo en negativo, lo llamen recesión o no. Situación preocupante, aunque parece que, bueno, se puede haber hecho un pequeño techo precisamente en los yields, ¿no? En el cupón que se paga, un 4,72, actualmente 4,21 en el 2 años. Vamos a ir echando un vistazo. Tenemos aquí para ver a nuestros amigos, a nuestro amigo Powell, pero vamos a ir echando un vistazo a ver cómo lo que está haciendo el SP500. Vamos a ir mirándolo ahora en diario. Bueno, de momento menos 0,3, tampoco es una caída muy alarmante. Ya sabéis que en Planeta Bolsa no llevamos ninguna de las coberturas. Y bueno, en este sentido, de momento el sistema tranquilo. Vamos a ver cómo acabamos. Ya decía hoy que me parecía que el mercado estaba descontando una posible mejora, ya que los nuevos mínimos que se están alcanzando en el NYSE tan solo son de 8 acciones que están marcando nuevos mínimos. Eso es algo bastante positivo. Y voy a poner un segundín, que estamos, por cierto, en el grupo, que lo pongo por aquí, de Telegram, ¿vale? Lo tenéis por aquí. Estaba dejando justo ahora el comentario para que os podéis unir en planetabolsa.com público, nos buscáis, ya 815 miembros, gracias a todos. Y vamos a poner que estamos retransmitiendo la reunión de la FED, las palabras de Powell. Vamos a ver qué tal. Vamos a ver qué tal se da. Bueno, ya por aquí 10 espectadores. Muchas gracias a todos, a los que compartís el contenido en las plataformas. Y esperar que le pongo aquí menos volumen. Y bueno, pues vamos a ver. Voy a abrir me gusta ver en TradingView el SP500 y el dólar, porque suelen cambiar muy deprisa, casi al instante. Precisamente vamos a abrirnos aquí el SP. Voy a minimizar de momento a mi broker, que ahora yo creo que lo vamos a utilizar menos. Y ojo, porque nos está dejando aquí alguna velita positiva. No sé en qué gráfico estamos, en qué temporalidad. Estamos en el 5 minutos. Vamos a dejarlo en 5 minutos, que es como a mí me gusta verlo. Fijaos en el 5 minutos, qué buen aspecto de mejora para el SP500, aunque lo verdaderamente interesante va a empezar a moverse cuando empiece a hablar Jerome. Y bueno, el Nasdaq, por su parte, intentando hacer también un pequeño apoyo. Las últimas velas desde prácticamente las 8 han sido alcistas. Parece que aquí se ha dejado una especie de techo en los 12.150. pero sensaciones bastante positivas. Y quiero buscar el euro dólar, ¿vale? Lo tenemos ahora mismo en una zona neutra, ha bajado bastante, ha subido bastante, prácticamente creo que a la par de cómo comenzábamos el día. Y bueno, vamos a dejar el SP muy atento, ya comienza nuestro amigo Jerome, y vamos a ver qué ocurre, ¿no? Vamos a ver qué tenemos por aquí. Vamos a escucharle, ahora os pongo el audio. Y voy a hablar de fondo, ¿vale? Si algo se oye mal, pues nada, ya me vais comentando. Vamos a ver. Ya están esperando a que salga. No tengo un boli. Vamos a ver, boli por aquí. Vamos a buscar un boli. Y vamos a ir anotando. Bueno, cometidos para traer la inflación abajo.
Over the past year, we've taken forceful actions to tighten the stance of monetary policy. We've covered a lot of ground, and the full effects of our rapid tightening so far are yet to be felt.
Venga, vamos a ir,
Even so, we have more work to do.
Más trabajo para hacer.
Price stability is the responsibility of the Federal Reserve and serves as the bedrock of our economy. Without price stability, the economy does not work for anyone.
Estabilidad de precios o
In
la
particular,
economía no
without
funciona.
price stability, we will not achieve a sustained period of labor market conditions that benefit all. Today, the FOMC raised our policy interest rate by 25 basis points.
Subimos 25
We
puntos
continue to
básicos.
anticipate that ongoing increases will be appropriate in order to attain a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive
Lo ve-
to return inflation to
Lo ve
2%
correcta
over
la
time.
subida.
In addition, we are continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet.
Reducción de balance.
Restoring price stability will likely require maintaining a restrictive stance for some time.
Dice que van a
I
seguir
will have more to say
manteniendo
about today's
su
monetary policy
política
actions after
durante algún
briefly
tiempo, ¿no?
reviewing
de
economic
reducción
developments.
de balance.
The U.S. economy slowed significantly last year, with real GDP rising at a below-trend pace of 1%.
Vale.
Recent indicators point to modest growth of spending and
1% de
production this
subida en
quarter.
el PIB
Consumer spending
americano.
appears to be expanding at a subdued pace, in part reflecting tighter financial conditions over the past year.
Se han recrudecido
Activity in the housing sector continues to weaken, largely reflecting
las
higher
condiciones
mortgage rates.
financieras.
Higher interest rates and slower output growth also appear to be weighing on business fixed investment. Despite the slowdown in growth, the labor market remains extremely tight, with the unemployment rate
Vale,
at
sigue
50-year
hablando del
low,
mercado de trabajo.
job
Fijaros las
vacancies
primeras
still
palabras de
very
Powell
high,
que poco ha
and
gustado.
wage growth elevated.
Fijaros, lo que está
Job
haciendo
gains have been
el
robust, with employment
Fijaos
rising
este
by an
primer
average of
movimiento del SP.
247,000 jobs per month over the last 3 months. Although the pace of job gains has slowed over the course of the past year and nominal wage growth has shown some signs of easing, the labor market continues to be out of balance. Labor demand substantially exceeds the supply of available workers, and the labor force participation rate has changed little from a year ago.
Vale. La participación en el mercado de
Inflation
trabajo ha
remains
cambiado
well above our
ligeramente.
longer run goal of 2%. Over the 12 months ending in December, total PCE prices rose 5.0%.
Vale, sube
Excluding
el
the
IPC un
volatile food and
5%.
energy categories, core PCE prices rose 4.4%. The inflation data received over the past 3 months show a
El último
welcome
año.
reduction in the monthly pace of increases.
Uf, el SP
And while recent
feo,
developments are encouraging, we will need substantially more evidence to be confident that inflation is on a sustained downward path.
Uf.
Despite elevated inflation, longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters,
Vale,
as
la
well as
economía
measures
parece de momento,
from financial
según nos
markets.
cuenta, fuerte.
But that's not grounds for complacency. Although
Mercado
inflation has
fuerte.
moderated recently, it remains too high. The longer the
Sigue
current bout of high
manteniéndose
inflation
alta.
continues, the greater as it erodes purchasing
Vale.
power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials,
Sabe
like
que,
food,
bueno, que
housing, and
supone un alto
transportation.
coste, la inflación, más allá de
We are
las
highly attentive to the
familias, de las
risks that
personas
inflation
que,
poses
al
to
final
both
la
sides
soportan,
of
de
our
las
mandate,
empresas.
and we are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective.
Sigue hablando del objetivo 2%
At
de
today's meeting, the
inflación.
committee raised the target range for the federal funds rate by 25 basis points, bringing the target range to 4.5 to 4.75%. And we are continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet.
Y sigue por segunda vez diciendo que va a
With today's
reducir el
action,
tamaño del
we
balance.
have
Ya
raised
sabéis,
interest rates by
el
4.5 percentage points
tapering,
over the past year. We continue to anticipate that ongoing increases in the target range for the federal funds rate will be appropriate in order to attain a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2% over time.
condiciones todavía bastante
We are seeing the
restrictivas
effects of
para
our
traer al
policy
2%
actions on
la
demand
inflación.
in the most interest-sensitive sectors of the economy, particularly housing. It will take time, however, for the full effects of monetary restraint to be realized, especially on inflation.
Vale, ahora dará tiempo
In light
todavía
of
en
the
el
cumulative
mercado
tightening of
de la-
monetary
de la
policy
vivienda, ¿no?
and the
Para que se
lags with
noten
which
las-
monetary policy
la
affects
inflación.
economic activity and inflation, the committee decided to raise interest rates by 25 basis points today, continuing the step down from last year's rapid pace of
Vale,
increases.
dice que la subida es obviamente
Shifting to a slower pace will better allow the committee to assess the economy's progress
una
toward our
aceleración
goals
mucho más lenta.
as we determine the extent of future increases that will be required to attain a sufficiently restrictive stance.
Se
We will
habla
continue to
a
make our
posibles,
decisions meeting by meeting, taking
subidas en el
into
futuro.
account the totality of incoming data and their implications for the outlook for economic activity and inflation. We have been taking forceful steps to moderate demand so that it comes into better alignment with supply.
Vale, dice que
Our
están
overarching focus is using our tools
mirando
to
la
bring
demanda
inflation
desde
back
cualquier
down
punto
to
de
our
vista
2% goal and to keep longer-term
para
inflation
igualarla
expectations
con la
well
oferta.
anchored.
el mercado de trabajo.
Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below-trend growth and some softening of labor market conditions.
Vale, bajando
Restoring
un poco las
price
condiciones
stability
en el
is
mercado de trabajo,
essential to
relajándolas.
set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run.
En el largo
The
plazo
historical record
buscan,
cautions strongly
ya
against
sabéis, máximo
prematurely
empleo.
loosening policy. We will stay the course until the job is done.
El trabajo
To
está hecho.
conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses
Bueno,
across
el
the country.
SPS nos vuelve arriba, ojito,
Everything we
ojito,
do
ojito a la
is in
vela
service to our
reversa
public mission.
y ojito a la vela
We at the
esto.
Fed will do everything
En
we
15
can to
minutos,
achieve
fijaros,
our
vaya
maximum
velón,
employment and
Ojo si
price
se
stability
mantiene.
goals.
Ojo si se
Thank you.
mantiene,
I look
sube,
forward to
sube,
your
sube,
questions.
sube, sigue subiendo. Sigue subiendo muy fuerte, ¿eh? Vamos a ver esa
Chris
vela si se
Rugaber,
mantiene o qué pasa.
Associated Press.
Preguntas.
Thank you for doing this. As you know, financial conditions have loosened since the fall, with bond yields falling,
Vale, los
which
bonos
has also
cayendo,
brought down
las
mortgage
condiciones
rates,
económicas cayendo, dice el
and the stock
periodista.
market posted a solid gain in January. Does that make your job of combating inflation harder? And could you see lifting rates higher than you otherwise would to offset the increase in, or to offset the easing of financial
Vale, está hablando
conditions?
de las subidas de tipo de interés.
So it is important that
Uf.
overall financial conditions continue
Sube
to
muchísimo el
reflect the
SP,
policy
¿eh?
restraint that we're putting in place in order to bring
Ojo.
inflation down to
Vamos a
2%.
ver cómo acaba, ¿eh?
And of course, financial conditions have tightened very significantly over the past year.
Tipo el que las condiciones
I
de
would say that
trabajo
our focus is not on short-term moves, but on sustained changes to broader
se
financial
han
conditions.
reducido bastante.
And it is our judgment that we're not yet at a sufficiently restrictive policy stance,
Seguirán
which is
con
why
una
we say
política
that we
restrictiva.
expect ongoing hikes will be appropriate.
Será
Of course,
apropiado
many
seguir
things
subiendo
affect
tipos de
financial
interés.
conditions, not just our policy. And we will take into account overall financial conditions along
Pero
with
que
many
tienen
other
todo en
factors
cuenta,
as we set policy.
Condiciones financieras, absolutamente todo. Uf, ahora baja un poquito.
Hi, Chair Powell. Thank you for taking our questions. Rachel Siegel from the Washington Post. Over the last quarter, we've seen a deceleration in prices, in wages, and a
Pregunta por
fall
la
in consumer
desaceleración
spending,
en salarios
all
y
while the
precios.
unemployment rate has been able to stay at a historic low. Does this at all change your view of how much the unemployment rate would need to go up, if at all, to see inflation come down to the levels you're looking for?
Le pregunta por la posible
So I would say it is
efecto de
a
bajada
good
de
thing that
inflación, subida de
the
desempleo.
disinflation that we have seen so far has not come at the expense of a weaker labor market. But I would also say that
Dice que no ve un
disinflationary
mercado de
process that you now
desempleo
see
bajo,
underway
débil.
is really at an early stage. What you see is really in the goods sector, you see inflation now coming down because supply
que-
chains have been fixed, demand is shifting back
Dice que
to services
la
and
demanda
shortages.
se
have been
alinea con
abated.
la
So you see that
oferta
in the
y que en algunos
in the
sectores se
in
empieza a ver esa
the
bajada
housing
de la
services
inflación, ¿no?
sector, we expect inflation to continue moving up. for a while, but then to come down, assuming that new leases continue to be lower. So in those two sectors, you've got a good story.
Puede ser que en el corto plazo la
The
inflación
issue is
va a
that we have
subir,
a
pero
large
que
sector
creen que
called
están en el camino
non-housing
correcto para el
services,
largo
core
plazo.
non-housing services, where we don't see disinflation yet. But I would say that so far, what we see is progress, but without any weakening in labor market conditions.
Has your
Go ahead.
Has your expectation for where the unemployment rate might
dando el
go changed
progreso.
since December?
You know, we're going to write down new forecasts at the March meeting, and we'll see at that time. I will say that it is gratifying to see the disinflationary process now getting
Previsiones al
underway,
futuro y que
and we
irán
continue to get
valorando
strong
en
labor market
futuras
data.
reuniones. No sé lo que le ha preguntado la
So,
chica porque justo estaba hablando yo.
But, you know, we'll update those forecasts in March.
Vamos, que actualizan en marzo. Le dan al botón de actualizar
Hi, Chair
en
Powell, Neil Irwin with
marzo.
Axios. You and some of your colleagues have emphasized the possibility that job openings could come down and that that would let some of the air out of the labor market without major job losses. We saw the opposite in the December JOLTS this morning, job openings actually rising. That also has coincided with slowdown in wage inflation. Do you believe that openings are an important indicator to be studying to understand where the labor market is and where wage inflation might be heading?
So you're right about the data, of course. We've seen average hourly earnings and now the employment cost index abating a little bit, still off of their highs of 6 months ago and more, but still at levels that are fairly elevated. The job openings number in JOLTS has been quite volatile recently, and I did see that it moved back up this morning. I do think that it's probably an important indicator. The ratio, I guess, is back up to 1.9 job openings to unemployed people who are looking for work. So it's an indicator, but nonetheless, you're right. We do see wages moving down. If you look across the rest of the labor market, you still see very high payroll job creation, and quits are still at an elevated level. So by many indicators, the job market is still very strong.
Conclusión, el mercado de trabajo muy fuerte.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the Financial Times. Given the economic data since the December meeting, is the trajectory for the Fed funds rate in the most recent SEP still the best guidepost for the policy path forward? Or does ongoing now mean more than 2 rate rises now?
So you're right. At the December meeting, we all wrote down our best estimates of what we thought the ultimate level would be, and that's obviously back in December, and the median for that was between 5 and 5.25%. At the March meeting, we're going to update those assessments. We did not update them today. We did, however, continue to say that we believe ongoing rate hikes will be appropriate to attain a sufficiently restrictive stance of policy to bring inflation back down to 2%. We think we've covered a lot of ground, and financial conditions have certainly tightened. I would say we still think there's work to do there. We haven't made a decision on exactly where that will be. I think we're going to be looking carefully at the incoming data between now and the March meeting and the May meeting. I don't feel a lot of certainty about where that will be. It could certainly be higher than we're writing down right now. If we come to the view that we need to write down to move rates up beyond what we said in December, we would certainly do that. At the same time, if the data come in the other direction, then we'll make data-dependent decisions that come in due course.
El Nasdaq también remontando fuerte, activando casi ese doble suelo.
The likelihood of maybe falling short of that or going beyond.
En el caso del eurodólar,
I guess I would say it this way.
El eurodólar también remontando muy fuerte, ¿vale?
It's very difficult to manage the risk of doing too little and finding out in 6 or 12 months that we actually worked close but didn't get the job done, and inflation springs back and we have to go back in, and now you really do worry about expectations getting unanchored and that kind of thing. This is a very difficult risk to manage. Whereas, of course, we have no incentive and no desire to over tighten. If we feel like we've gone too far, we can certainly. If inflation is coming down faster than we expect, then we have tools that would work on that. So I do think that in this situation where we have still the highest inflation in 40 years, the job is not fully done. As I started to mention earlier, we have a sector that represents 56% of the core inflation index where we don't see disinflation yet. So we don't see it. It's not happening yet. Inflation in core services ex housing is still running at 4% on a 6 and 12-month basis. So there's nothing happening there. In the other two sectors, representing less than 50%, you actually, I think, now have a story that is credible, that's coming together. Although you don't actually see disinflation yet in housing services, but it's in the pipeline, right? So for the third sector, we don't see anything here. So I think it would be premature, it would be very premature to declare victory or to think that we've really got this. We need to see, our goal, of course, is to bring inflation down. And how do we get that done? There are many factors driving inflation in that sector. And they should be coming into play to have inflation, the disinflationary process begin in that sector. But so far we don't see that. And I think until we do, we see ourselves as having a lot of work left to do.
Esa desinflación, ¿no? Esa primera bajada, pero que
todavía with Reuters
está en un comienzo, ¿no?
So I just wanted to connect a couple dots here.
No
The statement made a number of changes that seem to be saying things are getting better. You're saying inflation has eased. That's new. You've taken out references to the war in Ukraine as causing price increases. You've taken out references to the pandemic. You've eliminated all the reasons that you said prices were being driven higher. Yet that's not mapping to any change in how you describe policy. We still have ongoing increases to come. So I'm wondering, why is that the case? And does it have more to do with uncertainty around the outlook, or more to do with you not wanting to give a very overrated market a reason to get ahead of itself and overreact?
So I guess I would say it this way. We can now say, I think, for the first time, that the disinflationary process has started. We can see that, and we see it really.
Tenemos noticias, proceso desinflacionario acaba de comenzar.
This is what we thought would happen since the very beginning, and now here it is actually happening, and for the reasons we thought. It's supply chains, it's shortages,
puede estar descontado gran parte de la situación,
back towards services. So
y vamos a ir buscando a los índices.
But that's around a quarter of the PCE
core
PCE
superando resistencia
so
de
the
unas
second
semanas.
sector is housing services.
Primera resistencia importante superada, vamos hacia el 4.300, vamos a ver cómo cierra
as I mentioned, with housing services, we expect, and other forecasters expect, that measured inflation will continue moving up for several months, but will then come down, assuming that new leases continue to be soft. And we do assume that. So we think that that's sort of in the pipeline. And we actually see disinflation in the goods sector, and we see it in the pipeline for two sectors that amount to a little less than half. So this is good, and we note that when we say inflation is coming down. This is good. We expect to see that disinflation process will be seen, we hope soon, in the core goods ex-housing, core services ex-housing sector that I talked about. We don't see it yet. It's 7 or 8 different kinds of services. Not all of them are the same. And we have a sense of what's going on in each of those different subsections. Probably the biggest part of it, probably 60% of that is research would show is sensitive to slack in the economy, and so the labor market will probably be important. Some of the other ones, the labor market's not going to be important. Many other factors will drive it. In any case, we don't see disinflation in that sector yet, and I think we need to see that. It's the majority of the core PCE index, which is the thing that we think is the best predictor of headline PCE, which is our mandate. So it's not that we're either optimistic or pessimistic. We're just telling you that we don't see inflation moving down yet in that large sector. I think we will fairly soon, but we don't see it. Until we do, I think we see ourselves, we got to be honest with ourselves, we see ourselves as having perhaps more persistent, inflation in that sector, which will take longer to get down. And we're just going to have to complete the job. I mean, that's what we're here for.
Tienen que completar el trabajo, que tienen que seguir, que tienen que traer la inflación abajo. Bueno, yo creo que es un mercado,
Nick Timmeros, the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, you observed several years ago, you learned we can have a low unemployment rate without above target inflation, and we have learned lately that inflation can come down from its uncomfortably high level despite a historically low unemployment rate. Given that, and given how much you did over the last year, why do you think further rate increases are needed? Why not stop here and see what transpires in the coming months before raising rates again?
¿Por qué está
So
justificando la
we've
subida de
raised
tipos
rates
de
4.5
interés?
percentage points, and we're talking about a couple of more rate hikes
Si sabe que
to
está
get to
trayendo la
that level
inflación
we think
abajo
is
y en
appropriately
realidad hay una
restrictive.
tasa baja de
And why do we
desempleo,
think
¿no?
that's probably necessary? We think because inflation is still running very hot. We're,
Dice que
of course, taking into
justifica la
account
subida de
long variable
tipos
lags, and we're thinking about that.
con,
The story we're telling about
con
inflation
altas tasas de
is,
inflación.
to ourselves, and the way we understand it, is basically the three things that I've just
Bueno, no
gone
hay
through a couple
ninguna-
times. And
nada
again,
nuevo,
we
¿no?
don't see it affecting
Sí que
the
es cierto que hay una
services
serie de
sector
economistas que dicen que
ex housing
subidas en
yet.
tipos no traen en
But, I
realidad
mean, I think our
movimientos a la
assessment is
baja
that
de
we're
la
not very
inflación,
far
sino que
from that
los
level.
movimientos inflacionarios tienen que ver algo
We
más
don't
con
know
el
that,
mercado de
though.
trabajo
We
y
don't know
precisamente
that.
con
So
los
I think
salarios.
we're living in a world of significant uncertainty. I would look across the spectrum of rates and see that real rates are now positive, right by an appropriate
Saca
set of
cara un
measures are
poco por
positive across the
los-
yield curve. I think policy is restrictive. We're trying to make
por
a
los,
fine
tipos de
judgment
interés
about
reales
how much is
positivos.
restrictive enough. That's all. And we're going to, that's why we're slowing down to 25
Claro,
basis
ahora-
points. We're going to be
Ahora
carefully
ya,
watching the
ya no
economy
son negativos,
and
¿no?
watching
Que es un poco
inflation
lo que
and watching the
perjudicaba también
progress
al
of the
oro,
disinflationary
a los
process.
bonos tips, un
Did you or your
poco...
colleagues discuss the conditions for a pause at this meeting this week?
Vale, que se han
You'll
revisado,
see
han
that the minutes
valorado
will
una
come out in 3 weeks
pausa
and
en la
we'll give you a
subida
lot
de
of
tipos
detail.
para esta
We spent a
reuniones.
lot of time talking about the path ahead and the state of the economy, and I wouldn't want to start to describe all the details there, but that was the sense of the discussion, was really talking quite a bit about the path
Vale, dice que
forward.
está hablando mucho sobre el tema,
Victoria?
pero bueno, no ha concretado nada tampoco.
Hi, Chair Powell. I wanted to ask about the debt ceiling.
Bueno, techo de
Given that
deuda, le
we've
preguntan
now
por
hit
el
up
techo de
against
deuda.
it, I was wondering if the U.S. goes past the X date, will the
subida del
Fed
SP,
do whatever the Treasury directs
la verdad
as it
que
relates to
espectacular.
making payments as the fiscal
Esta
agent,
última
or
vez la
will it
veremos si es
do its
para
own
igual
analysis of any
luego
legal
nos engañan,
constraints?
¿no? Nos hacen el bull trap.
So your question is, would we...
Pero bueno, la subida
Say your
está siendo
question again.
espectacular.
Will the Fed do what Treasury
Claro,
directs
no,
as it relates
como
to
tenemos
making payments,
al SP
or will it do
precisamente
its
en
own
ese
analysis of
posible
any
taza
legal
con asa.
constraints?
Me voy a ir a
So
ver
you're
al
really
Russell.
asking about...
Pues ya tengo unas ganas horribles
You're
de
asking
ver
about
el Russell.
prioritization, in effect, is what
Yes,
you're... Okay.
yes.
So
A ver qué está haciendo el Russell.
I feel like I have to say this. There's only one way forward here, and
bueno,
that is for
fuerte.
Congress to raise the
Fuerte
debt
el
ceiling
Russell,
so that the
fuerte el
United States
Russell.
government can pay all of its obligations when due.
Está cotizando que ahora
And any
mismo
deviations from that
y
path
va un
would be highly risky,
2,4% arriba, no sé si
and
alguien me
that
lo puede
no one should
confirmar.
assume that the Fed can protect the economy from the
Voy a ver,
consequences of
Internet.
failing to act in a timely manner. In terms of our relationship with the Treasury, we are their fiscal agent, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Are you
Vamos a ver al
actively
Russell.
doing any planning of what might happen in the event that would happen?
I'm just going to leave it at
Russell
that. This
dormí,
is a
¿no?
matter that's to be resolved
Me pone menos
between,
0,15,
really,
no sé si es que
it's
este
really
es el
Congress's
13.
job to raise the debt ceiling, and I gather there are discussions happening, but they don't involve us. We're not involved in those discussions, so we're the fiscal agent.
Nasdaq 1,5, SP 0,83, Dow Jones 0,11 arriba, el crudo baja un
Gina Smiley from the
3,35.
New York Times. Thanks for taking our questions. I wonder, was there any discussion today of the possibility of pausing rate increases and then
Bueno, le
restarting
preguntan
them?
por
Lori
pausar
Logan
otra
from the
vez,
Federal Reserve Bank of
la
Dallas seemed to
tasa
suggest that that would be a
de tipos.
possibility in a recent speech, and I wonder if that view is broadly shared on the committee.
Tipos al 4,75, chicos. Bueno, yo creo que vamos a ir
The
dejándolo
committee, obviously, did not see this as a time to
por
pause.
aquí.
We judged that the appropriate, thing to
Vamos,
do
el
at this
mercado
meeting
sigue
was to
tirando
raise the
para
federal
arriba.
funds rate by 25 basis points, and we said that we continue to anticipate that
Positivo, desde
ongoing
luego.
increases in the target
Positivo.
range will be appropriate in order
Si
to
miramos
retain that
de nuevo
stance
en
of
5 minutos, pues
sufficiently
sigue
restrictive
subiendo,
monetary
no sigue
policy that
intentando
will bring
hacerlo bien.
inflation down to 2%.
Vamos a ver en qué acaba todo
That's
esto.
the judgment that we made.
Esperar un momento. Voy a bajar un poco el audio y bueno, nada, vamos a ver un poquito en qué acaba todo esto. Nos vamos a ir ahora a Capital Radio a comentar la situación, pero en general podemos ver una mejora significativa de los índices en estos primeros minutos. Voy a cerrar por aquí ya. Comienzo de desinflación. Ahí está el titular, yo creo. Inflación todavía muy alta al 2%, con un fuerte empleo, estabilidad de precios. Buscan precisamente ese 2%, ese núcleo en los alimentos, ¿no? Estabilizar esa inflación subyacente. Se han recrudecido mucho, obviamente, las condiciones financieras, pero el mercado de trabajo sigue estando fuerte. cree que se ha balanceado un poco la demanda y la oferta, ¿no? Y eso ha hecho que algunos sectores importantes pues todavía tengan margen para esa caída, ¿no? Esa caída de la inflación. Y pues bueno, en marzo seguirá monitorizando la política de tipos, el mercado de trabajo, y eso sí, los periodistas han insistido en la subida de tasas de la inflación, ¿no? De esos tipos de interés. Sí podría haber alguna pausa que de momento pues no se ha producido. Vamos a ver cómo acaba el cierre de mercado, todavía una hora por delante, y mañana ojo no tengamos alguna sorpresa. Lo que está claro es que, bueno, veníamos hoy comentando precisamente en Twitter, lo voy a poner por pantalla para que, bueno, estamos viendo, gracias a todos los que habéis apoyado las retransmisiones, tanto en Carolus como en los canales. Voy a dejar por aquí uno de los tweets que comentábamos precisamente esta mañana. Y es que decíamos, ¿no? que bueno, que en general viendo los nuevos mínimos de los últimos 6 días, estos son los últimos 6 días, que las condiciones han ido a menos, ¿no? Han ido a mejor, y visto que también en el S&P 500 pues teníamos una mejora significativa tras un pequeño apoyo por esa media de 30 sesiones. En rango diario vemos como las coberturas, ¿no? Como este césped verde que siempre hablamos de nuevos máximos, nuevos mínimos, este indicador, este Big Short, pues es que está claramente positivo. Y es que, claro, esto no lo veíamos desde 2021. Esto no es un mercado que te cae un 10, un 15%, que podría ocurrir, que ojo, que nadie se engañe, que aquí no está la última palabra dicha, pero es que estamos ahora mismo superando esos 4.100 puntos y nos vamos hacia un rango muy positivo, ahora mismo los 4.300, ¿no? Con prácticamente 0 empresas cayendo, la mayoría subiendo, la mayoría haciéndola bien en Wall Street. Parece que se ha girado, también parece que es típico que este tipo de días comience mal y vaya mejorando. Y a priori, pues bueno, obviamente tenemos que ver la evolución de hoy y mañana y del viernes, pero los sistemas de cobertura al menos no nos hacen ser miedosos, ¿no? Dice, perdona, David Mola decía Russell 1.14 arriba, gracias Hugo, también alumno de Planeta Bolsa. David Mola también decía 1.67 el Russell, gracias chicos por la información. Y parece que bueno, que tiene buen aspecto. Nosotros ya hemos tomado posiciones en índices y en la cartera LDR, la hemos vuelto a aprovechar la liquidez, y eso también es normalmente buena señal porque se abren los filtros de mercado. Y bueno, siempre lo digo, ¿no? Que nosotros lo único que podemos hacer, más allá de predicciones de la bruja Lola, es guiarnos por datos, ¿no? Antes de terminar, os dejo aquí a todos, para el que quiera aprender a formarse y ver el mercado de la manera en la que lo vemos, para analizar este market timing. Tenemos aquí el curso de Víctor Galán Bolsa en .com, con más de 16 horas y tenéis más de 400 páginas. Y bueno, pues es un poco, aquí tenéis opiniones reales de los alumnos, muchos de ellos ahora son alumnos de Planeta Bolsa. Y bueno, pues es un poco la formación, ¿no? que a veces nos preguntáis y seguimos dando, pues para intentar ver el mercado de la mejor forma y de la forma más óptima posible. Poco más que contar. 4.100 puntos ahí va a estar, veremos si no se tuerce la vela, ojalá que no, porque tiene muy buen aspecto, y vamos a vigilar no perder el 3.974 en SP, que ahora mismo es por donde primero pasa la media de 30 sesiones en diario, y obviamente también vamos a vigilar mucho ese semanal, ¿no? Esos 3.924 puntos, ahora mismo clave, 3.764, 3.490. Seguidnos toda la actualidad tanto por victorgalanbolsa.com como planetabolsa.com, así como el grupo de Telegram y los canales de diferentes plataformas, Twitter, Víctor G/bolsa. Allí nos vamos viendo, chicos. No sé si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, si no nos vamos a ir ya a Capital Radio. Menudas semanas llevamos estas primeras semanas de año. están siendo increíbles y muy frenéticas. No sé si alguien tiene alguna pregunta. ¿No? Vale, pues nada, chicos, ha sido breve, gracias, breves y 2 veces bueno, ya sabéis, dejar ahí el like, compartir el vídeo y bueno, uno de los pocos sitios, ¿no?, donde traemos precisamente esa traducción simultánea y podéis ver tanto el mercado como a Powell en directo. Gracias a todos.